are two slip knots you could start with. One is where you use the tail to pull the knot. You take the main string over the tail and pull the tail through the loop from the top. The other uses the working string to pull the knot. With this, you put the working string under the tail and pull the working string through the loop from the top. I prefer using the tail as the pulley. I'm sure either method will work. When making your first loop, you don't want it too tight or too loose. Make sure you can slip your hook in and out easily. To chain stitch, wrap your hook under and around the working string. Then pull through the loop to create a new loop. For this exercise, we'll need 3 chain stitches. If you're having trouble, make sure your hook is facing down so it slips through the V. When I taught my friends, I realized most of them didn't get that at first, so you're okay. Remember to keep it a little loose. On the side facing you, you'll see V's. On the back will be a single line. It reminds me of a braid. To connect the two ends of your work, professionals will tell you to go behind the front 2 strings. It's usually somewhat difficult, so I normally slip my hook around the back one, which is technically the same thing. Either way, slip stitch through every loop to connect into a ring. Once connected, you'll see there's a small hole in the middle. From here, we'll use this as our loop. Go through the center and wrap your hook under and around the working string. Only pull through the center loop. Here we need to incorporate the tail, so hold it up between our loop and the working string as you go under and around the working string again to pull through both loops. This is a single stitch and we will need 10 of these. Keep the string somewhat tight and your loops loose enough. This is the hardest part of the exercise since the tail likes to get in the way, the loops need to be a consistent size, and what you're working with is so tiny. We can pull the string to free up space for the required number of stitches since the tail is inside of our previous stitches. If the strings coming out of the center are too loose, you can pull one side of your current loop to tighten it. Once you have 10 single stitches, pull the tail tight to close the center circle. We don't need the tail anymore. You can leave it or continue working it in so it's hidden, but don't cut it or the center will loosen up. Go underneath the 2 strings forming a V, then go under and around the working string and only pull through the V. Go under and around the working string again and pull through both loops. Continue doing 2 of these single stitches in each stitch from the previous row. You will end up with 20 stitches in this row. If you find yourself struggling frequently, it means your stitches are too tight. Keeping them loose enough for your hook is important. If you're using the right size hook for the size of string you're using, the holes in the stitches will be minimal. Now that there's 20 single stitches in our row, we can move on. In the first stitch, do a single stitch. In the second stitch, do 2 single stitches. Then repeat the pattern. We will end up with 30 single stitches. When you're done with that row, this next row will be similar. Without telling you the pattern, I can tell you that your 1 single and 2 single stitch pattern will line up with the previous row's stitches. In the first stitch, you will do 1 single stitch. In the second stitch, you will do 1 single stitch. And in the third stitch, you will do 2 single stitches. Now you have a pair above a pair. Apply the same rule to the next row. In your first stitch, do 1 single stitch. In your second stitch, do a single stitch, and in your third stitch, do a single stitch. Your fourth stitch is a pair, so do 2 single stitches. If your rows ever get off by a stitch, that means you've probably skipped a stitch. When this happens, undo your work back to where you skipped the stitch. If it's too far back, just add a second stitch somewhere to even out the number of stitches. Always try to be mindful of what you're doing. The exercise is over. Let's review. In row 1, we did our slip knot and 3 chain stitches. We then connected stitch 1 and 3 together with a slip stitch. In row 2, we went through the center and incorporated our tail string to make 10 single stitches. We used the remains of the tail to tighten the center hole. In row 3, we did 2 single stitches in each of the 10 stitches. In row 4, we did 1 single stitch, then 2 single stitches, and continued adding 1 single stitch to our pattern in every row thereafter. You might notice that your circle is more geometric than it is circular. This happened because of multiple factors, such as our pair stitches being lined up, we used small hooks, and we did single stitches. You can tug on your work to smooth it out a little. If you continue working on this with rows of 1 single stitch per stitch, you'll get a bowl. If you make 2 and connect them, or if you know how to decrease, you can make a ball. I used a size G hook in this video, but if you use a size I, J, or K hook and do this pattern with double stitches instead of single stitches, you'll get an adult size hat. I'll make another video on that sometime in the future. I hope this helped you. Let me know what I can improve on and what you'd like to learn about next. In my next video, I'll be doing a square. Stay tuned!